Hello, friends. Welcome back to another edition of our NBA Insider video live stream notebook right here on the one, the only Bleacher Report app. And we thank everyone who tunes in on YouTube as well. We are coming to you today, Thursday, November 13th, at our usual 5 p.m. Eastern time. And what better place to start off today's programming than in Dallas, where my colleague, the Hall of Famer, Mark Stein, on our shared Substack, the Stein Line. If you are not subscribing there, he has been pouring out the digital ink on all things where Patrick Dumont finally parted ways with overall incumbent and struggling general manager Nico Harrison, who, of course, struck the most infamous trade in NBA history, trading Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and one 2031 first-round pick. You see it there. In April, Nico Harrison talked about how this team, the famous defense win championships line, he thought would be competing for a title. They were together for one half of a game before Anthony Davis went down with a groin strain, before Kyrie Irving tore his ACL, before an eventual summer offseason that did not net out a much better outcome. Obviously, Kyrie was going to be out until potentially January at the earliest, but a 3-8 start where I was in Washington, D.C. last weekend for the Wizards home back-to-back against the Cleveland Cavaliers, first on Friday and then against the Dallas Mavericks on Saturday. And it was pretty striking to hear both from players, from team officials, and members of that traveling party that for Dallas, it had simply grown easier for them to play road games than play home games due to all of the rightful, never-ending, incessant fire Nico chants that were just privy to every single stoppage and lull of home games at the American Airlines Center. And you flash forward to Monday night, was it? The game against Milwaukee. PJ Washington is at the foul line for a chance to tie the game. And what do you hear but fire Nico chants? And that was something, the decision to fire Nico Harrison was already made, and the ink was basically dry, to use a proverbial expression. But that moment of PJ Washington at the foul line, and instead of quiet, instead of support from that home crowd, you had a deafening fire Nico. That was truly a flashbulb moment and a clear indicator as to why Patrick Dumont, the Mavericks' new governor taking over after Mark Cuban sold the team to the Addison family, knew and had decided that it was time to finally listen to this fan base and move on. So I've seen it in the chat a ton already. AD trades, AD trades, AD trades. Easy Dirty Birds says Dallas is breathing a sigh of relief now. That's certainly the case. Mavericks fans have been wanting this since April, and they finally have gotten the justice that they have been craving for. But I want to slow anyone in our chat and anyone who's read our work on the Stein Line, anyone on Twitter, anyone watching. I want to slow the roll about a fire sale in Dallas happening tomorrow. Now that Michael Finley, the former All-Star, the longtime executive, I see it in the chat, 80 to the Sixers, 80 to Chicago. We'll get to all that. But I think we're going to get to that in December, in January, in February. Because for now, I think Mike Finley and Matt Riccardi, the two interim co-general managers of this organization, and the front office, there was no one else who got let go. It was just Nico Harrison for now. I think there will be some other changes to come, but I haven't heard of any other front office executives who are in the crosshairs and potentially going to be out of work in the near future. It was just a Nico Harrison thing because honestly, the more you talk to more people around the situation, this always seemed to be a Nico Harrison thing. I think there were plenty of people on board in the organization who wanted to part ways with Luka Doncic for various reasons, for conditioning, for wondering about how his health and fitness was going to age over time, especially when he was due for a major contract extension this past summer. He was due for a massive supermax that clearly Nico Harrison and several members of that front office just were concerned that he'd be able to age well within that. But Nico Harrison wanted Anthony Davis, and that is definitively why this process was never opened up to a league at large bidding market across the marketplace, why the Mavericks didn't get everything that they could have gotten back from the Lakers, including first round draft capital year after year, Austin Reeves, whatever you wanted, because you're trading Luka Doncic, who was 25 and a multi-time first-time All-NBA selection who had just taken the team to the NBA Finals. Nico Harrison wanted Anthony Davis. We've been documenting that for some time now. And the biggest issue with that trade, forgetting the fact that you did not open it up to the whole league, forgetting the fact you didn't get everything back from the Lakers, was because Anthony Davis was 6 years older and one of the more injury-prone guys in the whole league. And where is he now? On the sidelines for 7 straight games. And that, I think, was some of the biggest part of the malpractice that this trade ultimately was, and eventually why Nico Harrison was let go. So this front office group, without him in at the head of all of it as the figurehead, they're going to really evaluate this group and see what they can be and see what these pieces really net out to from a trade market standpoint. Because right now, if you want to trade Anthony Davis to Chicago or trade him to wherever you want, and the Chicago stuff in the chat, I just want to reiterate that. Sorry, I'm getting a text message here. I want to reiterate that piece of information came out today by John Wall, the former All-Star point guard from DC, saying that he's heard that Anthony Davis has been wanting to go back to his hometown of Chicago, where he became the number 1 prospect in the country before going to Kentucky, before being drafted to New Orleans, before winning a championship with the Lakers, and then being that piece that went to Dallas, back for Luka Doncic. All that stuff, Anthony Davis has to be healthy and prove a sample size of his full two-way dominance in order for Dallas to really get everything back that they would want to get back to even make it worth their while to move him. All the other pieces, PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, what have you, they're going to have their trade markets. But for both Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving, their health and their availability is going to ultimately impact what their trade market and what their value can be for Dallas. And the Mavericks really aren't in a position to just sell, regardless of the price, because they are so asset strapped, being that Nico Harrison's front office has sent out all of their draft capital after this year with swaps and outright picks. There's some protections in there, but to Washington for Gafford, to Charlotte for PJ Washington and what have you. So recouing the draft capital that they've already mortgaged to build a championship team while they're 3-8 and one of the worst teams in the West, that is going to be up top of mind. But I think the Mavericks so far are saying that they're going to be patient with this process and they're not just going to snap their fingers and make snap judgments here. So we're in the very early stages of the post Nico Harrison era for the Mavericks. So stay tuned. We are going to be talking about this throughout now till February when the trade deadline buzzer sounds, because the Mavericks are officially one of the leading contenders to be a major seller leading up to the trade deadline. But it's still too early to really get a pulse on what they're going to be looking for and what those markets could really shape out and look like for the foreseeable future. One player that the teams around the league have been looking at as a potential major trade domino who could become available this season, depending on how things go, has been Trae Young. And that's been the case ever since Trae Young and the Hawks made it pretty clear around the NBA that they were not going to be coming to a contract extension this past summer, even though Trae Young was eligible for one, and even though he could opt out and become a free agent this summer. The Hawks and Trae Young both, as we've talked about on this stream, have been wanting to see him in this new iteration of Atlanta with Dyson Daniels in the fold, with Kristaps Porzingis now as a stretch pick and pop five, with Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Luke Kennard and Jalen Johnson healthy. They want to evaluate this group, and Trae Young knew that he would have a tremendous opportunity this season with a real lineup around him to lead a winning team and perhaps have some playoff success like he did in the 2021 Eastern Conference playoff bracket, where he led a team to the Eastern Conference Finals, and that was going to set him up for a big payday. Well, now he's been out for quite some time. The Hawks are 5-2 without Trae Young in the lineup, dealing with an MCL injury since October 29th. And that has definitely led some people around the league to wonder what this could mean ultimately for his future, just like Anthony Davis in Dallas, just like John Morant in Memphis. We'll touch on that next. You see the more damning overall record of 9-4 without Trae Young in the last two seasons. But I think the Hawks are far more pragmatic than the questions from the outside are. And they know that this last 3-game win streak has come against a shorthanded Lakers team that's without LeBron and Austin Reeves. The Clippers, who are in a free-for-all, who have lost 6 straight games and haven't won since Halloween. And a Kings team that we're going to touch on later in the show, too, that are just absolutely falling apart. You see this tweet from Caleb Colossus here that the Hawks are not better without Trae Young long-term. And I think the Atlanta Hawks are taking that approach as well. It's just enough of a sample size so far that I'm just here to tell you that rival teams are wondering out loud whether or not this is enough of a sample size that's going to get Atlanta to consider what a future could look like without him, because they have to be considering that, being that he could opt out right now and test for agency and leave for nothing. That is a very much realistic scenario that could occur at some point next offseason. So interesting to follow here, as good as Atlanta continues to play without Trae Young in the lineup. Mookie Pimplock in our chat says maybe Atlanta could work Trae Young and KP for Anthony Davis. I really don't think that the Hawks are looking to move on from Kristaps Porzingis right now, but I also don't think the Hawks thought Anthony Davis was going to become available anytime soon. So that's an interesting one. That's an interesting one to me. I have really been kicking around a fake trade idea and asking executives who says no between Atlanta trading Trae to Memphis for Ja. And that's something that's really interesting to me. But I'm not reporting that's been a conversation whatsoever. That's just kind of the trade type of deal that I think makes sense. Usually a star for star kind of deal. Russell Westbrook for John Wall kind of stuff. Hack Nation says trade Trae and build a team more via picks or players along with the Pelicans' first round pick, and they're set for the future. Again, I think Atlanta is far more focused on incorporating Trae back into this and seeing what it all looks like. But that is the alternative that's right there. That's why it's such a question that other teams are having and looking at this situation. You've got your 3 young core pieces in Zach Ricochet, Jalen Johnson, and Dyson Daniels right there. Azor Butterfly is saying, don't spread this narrative that they're better without Trae. I'm agreeing with you. It's just a question that people are asking. Zeke1534 says, surely the Grizz won't move Morant when you can examine the Dallas fiasco. Well, let's shift that to the Grizzlies, where Memphis was in town here in New York on Tuesday and got their asses handed to them by the Knicks. I'm sorry. That's just what it was. And it was striking to see the lack of two-way effort and energy from both John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and really up and down that whole roster. It was striking. It was really striking. Then Trae Young, I mean, he had a little ankle thing flare up against the Knicks. We saw it. It was on the far end of the court. He stayed in the game. He played. But second night of back-to-back in Boston, he sits out, and the Grizzlies just get obliterated by the Celtics last night in Boston. And Tuomas Isolo, the head coach who Memphis targeted from Paris basketball and replaced him or replaced Taylor Jenkins with him. He was their guy. He was their replacement. That was seemingly cut and dried the situation all along. He said pregame and postgame, and it's a fair excuse and reason right now that Memphis is without their star rookie, top rookie center, Zach Edey from a year ago. They're without Brandon Clark. They're without their top free agent signing, Ty Jerome, who is, of course, supposed to be the steadying floor general force when John Morant is off the floor, but also someone that was supposed to be able to handle a lot of the lead ball handling duties and put John Morant in more of an off ball scoring attacking role. You see the stats right there. Very poor efficiency. He definitely was distributing very, very well against New York, getting in the paint, slinging the ball to the opposite corner. You see the 10 assists there. The assist numbers have been high, and Isolo praised him for that. But the overall locked in, lack of being locked in, lack of just fully exerting his will on the floor was so jarring to me in person in New York. And I asked him about it in the locker room. He said he's still feeling fatigued. I'm seeing in the chat Zeke1534 saying, don't forget about Pippen Jr. He's definitely another name that Tuomas Isolo really valued and said that Memphis is missing. And I agree, but I can just tell you from being in that locker room, being around that team on Tuesday night, John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and the rest of this Grizzlies roster, as Zeke1534 is also saying here, that Morant's catching all the blame. But look at the Grizzlies starting wings, KCP and Jalen Wells. Jalen Wells and everyone else on this roster, it was Jock Landale. It was everyone not named Cedric Howard, really. The defensive effort was abominable. And it's a team that clawed back and turned what could have been a 30-point deficit into a 13-point loss. But the Grizzlies are so downtrodden right now. And the further they fall before this group does get healthy, Zach Edey is supposed to be coming back relatively soon. There are definitely rival executives who are wondering whether or not the Grizzlies will have to consider a full-on teardown here in the relative future of not just Ja Morant, but Jaren Jackson Jr. himself as well. And we'll see, because that move to deal Desmond Bane to Orlando for 4 first-round picks for a 5th pick swap, it certainly set up Memphis to have a bit of a pivot opportunity where the Grizzlies could very well find themselves in a bottoming out, rebuilding type situation. It's very plausible. And this is a front office under Zach Kleiman that's been very aggressive in the draft, that has loved to play the draft and find guys and pinpoint guys that they really want. They just did it with Cedric Howard. They've done it by trading up for Zaire Williams. They've traded in. They traded out of the first round, all over the place for the last several years. So it's something that I think would be interesting to see unfold, because right now, the way this team is presently constructed, even with Brandon Clark and even with Zach Edey and Ty Jerome coming back, I do not think that this group, from what I saw, has the firepower to really compete in the Western Conference, especially when you've got Denver with Nikola Jokic sleepwalking to 55 points, and Oklahoma City is just an absolute juggernaut. The Lakers don't even have LeBron back yet. You've got Minnesota figuring things. It's just, you can go down the list. Johnny Rhodes said he cooked up some John Morant trades. Hero is the key piece coming back to Miami. I do wonder what John Morant could look like in the vaunted Heat culture, but for now, I don't think he's a fit there with that whatsoever. To Polish Hammer saying he sees Beal on the rundown. Dude, what on earth is going on with the Clippers? Let's shift over to Los Angeles with that note, because the Clippers have not won since October 31st. And Bradley Beal is now out for the season with season-ending hip surgery, which I saw a quote from Ty Lue post-game last night saying how difficult it is for the Clippers without their first and their third best players, he was looking at Bradley Beal as the Clippers' third most important piece on offense. And that just goes to show how much Los Angeles really expected Bradley Beal to uphold this offense, especially with the fact that Norm Powell went out and John Collins and Bogdan Bogdanovic came back in. Obviously, Bogdan was a trade deadline addition a year ago in that Terrence Mann to Atlanta deal. But they definitely had major expectations for Bradley Beal to be a legitimate factor for this team. They were waiting out his buyout situation with the Phoenix Suns and their whole second apron gymnastics. And we talked about on this show live from the Thomas and Mack Center concourse in Las Vegas about how Bradley Beal needed to wait until July 15th to get his full advance before he got bought out and was going to go to the Clippers and saw this opportunity versus a chance with Golden State and a chance at Minnesota. He really was going to be this kind of Paul George replacement. Honestly, forget about Norm Powell. But as Johnny Rockets Burner is saying, it's good to note that CP3 is barely being used. He's older for sure, but still CP3 has not been anything close to the stabilizing presence he was in San Antonio just a year ago when he played 80 games and absolutely helped uplift a Spurs offense all season long, especially before Victor Wembanyama went down with a season-ending injury. He has not been anything close to what he was for San Antonio last year, let alone to what he was for Phoenix before that. Klein is saying it just seems like all the pieces traded for or acquired aren't panning out. And that is definitely the bottom line here, which is really, really disappointing because honestly, I thought the Clippers, there was a preseason game against Denver where they went down to the wire and Brook Lopez is hitting turnaround mid-range jumpers and Beal's out there and CP's out there. And the Clippers really looked like, to me, a viable threat to challenge for the Western Conference crown. Obviously, without Kawhi, this group doesn't even have anything close to the top level talent to compete with the likes of those giants we were just listing before. But if Kawhi is healthy, when Kawhi is healthy, Mason Miller Light is asking, should the Clippers be buyers at the deadline? And to be honest, I think they're too deep in the hole to not be. They have done everything they can to restructure this group post Paul George, around Kawhi, around James Harden. Ivica Zubac has absolutely developed into one of the top 10 two-way centers in the league, maybe even pushing top 5. And this group is still on a 6-game losing streak right now. It's a difficult situation, and I don't really know what they can do in the interim, aside from hoping for a cleaner bill of health, aside from hoping for some regression to the mean in a positive sense for Brook Lopez's shooting, for Bogdan Bogdanovic's shooting. Drew Jack 20N is saying the Clippers need to just make whatever moves they can while some of these guys have any kind of value. I think that means in a selling capacity, and that's just not in the Clippers' DNA. This is a group that has been so focused on reshaping themselves in this Kawhi era, going from Kawhi and PG to Kawhi and PG and James Harden to now Kawhi and James Harden, and making those shrewd moves on the edges of turning Norm Powell into John Collins, knowing that Norm Powell, the reason Norm Powell is not on this team, though, is because the Clippers did not want to commit long-term money to him. And if you look at the Clippers books, which I do not have up in front of me, but off top of mind, they do not have a ton of long-term salary committed. Kawhi is only has 1 year left after this year. If you go back to the whole debacle of not wanting to sign Paul George for longer than the 150 extension that Kawhi signed, Harden only signed a 2-year deal with a player option, the non-guaranteed second year of the season. The Clippers have been focused on maintaining future flexibility to continue to be good and to continue to be optimizing this group to win and put a winner out in front of the new Intuit Dome wall and that crowd and try to continue to cement themselves as a long-term perennial playoff powerhouse in the Western Conference. So I do not see Los Angeles pivoting by any stretch. It's still early. It's just striking to see Los Angeles be this poor this early, especially being that James Harden has been seemingly right there with where he was as an all-star last year. Zubac is still there. And the loss of Bradley Beal is going to be really interesting to see how this group overcomes. I mean, so far internally, there was a clear difference last night against Denver in playing at least Jordan Miller and trying to see what type of young development and internal development there could be there for the foreseeable future before major changes could possibly come December 15th, which for those who are not apprised, that date is the big date where the majority of players who sign new contracts in free agency become eligible to be traded this season. And that date could spark major changes in Sacramento, in Northern California, where the Kings lost by 33 points last night to Atlanta. You see it on the Chiron. They are 27th in defensive rating, 25th in offensive rating. And there was already a report by Dave Carmichael locally that the Kings are getting ready to look at the trade markets for all of Domantas Sabonis, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and go down the list. That I don't think is very surprising. And it's something that Doug Christie immediately responded to with a pregame spiel talking about how we're going to go to work and we're going to hear we're keep your same energy. We're going to hear your hating energy. We're going to go to work and we're going to build this thing out. We're going to prove to you how good we can be. Then they go out and lay an absolute egg to Atlanta, where Doug Christie comes out post-game and says that his players didn't take enough pride, and if he was out there, he would have worked harder. It does not seem like there's much positive momentum building in Cowbell Kingdom right now. And I can tell you that there was already enough pessimism before the year began. Here it is. Doug Christie saying, you're not going to represent the Sacramento Kings that way. Not while I'm here. Put on our jersey, represent it properly. He's embarrassed. At 55, he could have done better than that. I mean, I don't think he can. And it's on him. It's on the head coach to encourage the effort that is needed to win games on a nightly basis. So I just don't see how that approach is even beneficial to getting greater effort from the starting lineup. Keegan Murray's been dealing with his own injury stuff, but this is absolutely shaping into a situation where Sacramento is going to be right in the mix of sellers at the trade deadline. They just have to be. Drew Jack 20N is saying Portland's going to steal Markkanen or Sabonis. At this point, as good as Domantas Sabonis is, the questions of how fortified, how great of a defense you can build around Domantas Sabonis has been out there for a long, long time. And with Portland already having a major big man glut, where they've been looking to see if anyone could pay a high premium for Robert Williams and what have you, I don't really see Domantas Sabonis' value having an absolute great market right now. It just, outside of that one magical year where the Kings lit the beam and they got the 3 seed, there really hasn't been a ton of success to this Domantas Sabonis era in Sacramento. When you look back at the trade for Tyrese Halliburton, he was a 25-year-old two-time All-Star center. And I mean, I was there for Yahoo in December of 2022, 2023, whatever year the light the beam early, it was 2022. And I was drinking the Kool-Aid and I saw Domas as a lighthouse holding that rock, directing traffic. He had all his behind the back dribble handoff stuff with Kevin Herter and Keegan and De'Aaron Fox. And you look up at this situation now, and I don't see a lot of reason for optimism why there would be positive returns to come on the trade market for him at this juncture. But as Flaming Boy 07 says, tear the whole thing down and go full youth movement. all this is worth it if they get to keep a top pick. I think that's very, very likely. And E Divine 9177 says the Fox trade doomed them. Dysfunctional management in Sacramento. It's up to Scott Perry now, who I will say from my early conversations around the league has impressed, I'd say, agents and other teams about his approach to players and cap management and what have you. So this is a big opportunity for Scott Perry to right this ship here and start off this next era of Kings basketball with his imprint. Because these trading out these veterans, which seems like that is the path we are heading down, is an opportunity to start a real rebuild in earnest after the Aaron Fox trade did not bring back nearly the type of haul that you would have hoped to reignite a youth movement typically would bring. So that is going to do it for today's show. A lot of dysfunction, a lot of struggling teams, but that's where the rumor mill ends up focusing on this time of year, trying to project out where and when activity will fall on the NBA map as we get closer to December 15th, just about a month away from when the unofficial start of NBA trade season begins. But for now, we're going to keep coming back to you once a week, our typical Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern time, to break it all down for you, the latest news and notes from around the NBA. Until then, thank you all for tuning in and have a great rest of your week. See ya.